there isn't anything that comes out of your paycheck. You keep it all. So we're going to do a PowerPoint. Well, I'm going to hold this for a second. I want to show you these two books. The way I got started in Fairtax was in 2005. I was traveling across the country. I was going to a meeting, and I stopped in the airport in Charlotte, I think, and I saw this book. I was not political. I wasn't ever planning on running for office. But I saw this book, and I just saw how the IRS was marked out. So I picked it up, and I looked at the back, and it said, "Wouldn't you love to abolish the IRS?" And it spoke to me, so I picked it up and read more. Keep all the money in your paycheck. Pay taxes on what you spend, not on what you spend, not on what you earn. I read this book in that one flight. It's 200 pages. I highly recommend it. It's written by a guy named Neil Borch, who used to be on the radio. And I encourage you to read it. If we talk to you today and you're interested, I would recommend reading this book, but we've also put stuff on the table that will help you. Yes. No, Steve Forbes has promoted a flat tax. We are talking about Fairtax, and they're so very different. You'll understand that in just a few minutes. So, thank you very much. This is Bob Paxton and Ron Malera. They're going to do a presentation, and I think you'll enjoy it.
We have a weekly video podcast we call the Fairtax Power Radio. It's on Facebook Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And we always start, I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
And we are the FAIRtax Guys. And we hope that you all will look at our podcast. We started about 5 years ago on an internet radio station. And it has kind of just evolved from there to where we are now. We're on all kinds of social media, and he knows them all and I don't.
Yeah, we stream live to Facebook, the Facebook Fairtax official page, every Tuesday night at 8 Eastern, which would be, 5 o'clock Pacific. Okay, but after that, it's also it stays on Facebook, obviously. It's on YouTube, it's on Rumble. I posted to Parler, MeWe, Gab, LinkedIn. All right, so you can find our weekly video just about everywhere. This Tuesday, in a few days, is going to be a special edition of Fairtax Power Radio featuring Jade Wally, who's a CPA from Colorado, very knowledgeable and also an expert. All right, I beg you, if you're new to the Fairtax, this is going to require a conceptual leap, a paradigm shift away from the income tax, which is all we've known our entire lives. The income tax, IRS, tax returns, exemptions, exceptions, and so forth. And the Fairtax replaces all that, which is, like I said, it's going to require. So be patient with yourself, and the more you learn about it, in fact, we always say that when you understand it, you'll demand it. But be patient with yourself, and the more you learn about it and you become fans of the Fairtax, be patient with your constituents too, because as hard as we work, we haven't reached a critical mass of people yet, and hopefully you'll help us do that. So, Bob made a great PowerPoint here. So,
Well, this is our first opportunity to present to candidates like you all. We certainly appreciate your attention for being here. Now, because of what we're trying to do here, we're not really going to lift the hood and get into the wonky nuts and bolts of all how this thing works here. We're going to show you how fast the car goes, okay? If there are questions later about how it all works, we'll be around, Laura will be around. But for now, you all are trying to run for office. And I want to show you how the Fairtax can be a winning issue at the ballot box. Anybody think that's a good idea? And the reason that it can be a winning issue at the ballot box is because it is a winning solution for America. As Ron mentioned, the Fairtax is the biggest, boldest, brashest, most out-of-the-box tax reform idea ever proposed. Now, if you remember, think back a couple of years ago, you heard some of those same kind of superlatives being applied to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Remember? Politicians up there were just congratulating themselves no end on how this wonderful, significant, sweeping tax reform, we managed to accomplish it. We're good guys. Okay? Well, I got news for them. Let me quote my friend Kerry Ballot. He says the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act took a system that was based on personal and corporate income taxes along with federal payroll taxes, administered and enforced by the Internal Revenue Service, took all that and transformed it into a system of personal and corporate income taxes, payroll taxes administered and enforced by the Internal Revenue Service. Folks, that is not tax reform. They went in there and tweaked a few parameters within the system, and there's certainly no denying that what they did was beneficial to the economy. But the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was not tax reform. It was tax relief, for which we are grateful. The tax reform is the fair tax. Let's talk a second about what it is. This, as we speak, it's actual legislation. This is not some abstract in the back of somebody's head or some scribblings on the back of somebody's dinner napkin. The fair tax is an actual piece of legislation. It is standing before Congress as we speak. It's H.R. 25. If you want, you can go to congress.gov, pull it up, and read the whole thing. Now, we have distributed Carrie Bauer's Reader's Digest version of the bill. That's around on some of the tables. Hopefully you've seen those. If you haven't gotten one, Laura, I think you have any more. We can make sure that you get one if you like it. But this is actual legislation. It's not some theoretical abstract. It was designed entirely in the private sector. Not a single politician's fingerprints are anywhere on this. In the process of designing what became known as the fair tax, it wasn't called that right out of the box, but in the process of designing this thing, those economists spent over $20 million privately funded, not a dime of taxpayer dime money went into that. They did all that kind of research to make sure that it does exactly what it says it'll do. The fair tax is without question the most thoroughly researched tax reform proposal ever. And I go farther on them and say it's the most thoroughly researched legislative proposal of any kind, ever. And you'll still hear some of these mealy-mouthed, measly politicians, you ask them about the fair tax, and they'll say, well, yeah, I think it's a good idea, but it needs more study. Yeah. All right, well, how much more study do you think it needs? It's got $20 million behind it. When you hear somebody like that, you know that you're dealing with some mealy-mouthed weasel who just wants to make you believe that he's standing with you and is going to support you and all that, but he doesn't want to do a darn thing when it comes to delivering on his goods, okay? And those are the kind of people we need to get out of Congress. Right. All right, I thought you all might like that. The fair tax has been described as the greatest transfer of power from the government to the people in history. And that is probably why it has died in committee every year since 1999. Now, you heard me right, 1999. The fair tax has been up in Congress as a legislative proposal for over 20 years. During those 20 years, there have been times when the Republicans were in the majority, there have been times when the Democrats were in the majority, and nobody on either side has done beans with it. It is not, in 20 years, it hasn't even been given a hearing in committee, much less brought up to the House floor for debate and a vote. This is something that clearly the swamp rats on both sides of the aisle don't want anything to do with, which means it is a fantastic opportunity for people like you. The guy talked about earlier about wanting to be a purple cow. You embrace the fair tax. I know we can't be one-trick ponies. We've got to rely on several different issues. But if you make the fair tax a prominent issue that you want to campaign on and stand out, you will not only be a purple cow, it will be covered head to toe with bright, flashing purple LEDs. And probably some other colors thrown in if you want to. So that's how you do that. And again, this is not something, if you want to separate yourself from the swamp creatures, latching on to the fair tax is a good way to do it. Okay, now just exactly what is it? Laura mentioned a minute ago that the fair tax replaces the federal income tax. I'll say that again. It replaces, and there it is in big, bold, red letters, capitalized and underlined, replaces the federal income tax. So look what happens when the fair tax becomes law. Personal income taxes, gone. Corporate income taxes, gone. Federal payroll taxes, gone. Capital gains taxes, gone. Taxes on interest and dividends, gone. Estate and inheritance taxes, gone. The alternative minimum tax, gone. The IRS, out of business. Federal withholding from paychecks, gone. Tax returns, gone. Over 800, I looked it up, there are over 800 different tax forms at the IRS right now. All 800 of them, when the fair tax becomes law, gone. IRS audits, gone. Civil asset forfeiture, when they sweep in and take your bank account without even accusing you of doing anything wrong. Gone. Compliance costs of millions and billions of dollars that businesses have to spend just to comply with the tax code. Gone. The embedded cost of the income tax system and the prices of everything we buy. Gone. The Fairtax gets rid of all of that garbage and replaces it with a simple, progressive retail consumption tax. Now don't let that word progressive fool you. We're not talking about a political ideology here. We're talking about a tax system that fairly distributes the tax burden across economic strata. In other words, it makes sure that everybody pays their fair share. But it is a simple consumption tax. You pay it anonymously at the cash register when you buy things on new goods and services. And one of the design parameters of the Fairtax that team of economists I was telling you about earlier was tasked with, make sure that your creation comes up with the same amount of revenue for the government as the current income tax. So that's what it does. Now, if I can for a second, I'd like to show you some videos. There's 5 of them. They're really short. They're less than a minute apiece. But they do a really, really good job of kind of explaining what the Fairtax is and comparing and contrasting it with the income tax. So hang on a second if I can get this to work like it's supposed to.
So tell me how it works.
You know, it's probably changed since the last time I saw it, but the short answer would be, you want to take this one?
Oh, sure. Okay. Imagine bringing home everything you make. You don't get taxed for saving or accumulating wealth, and your boss doesn't get taxed more even if he pays you more.
Wow, see, that's amazing.
So the end result of all that is the cost of producing products and running a business goes down, so things cost less. And on top of all that, imagine every criminal, non-citizen, and under-the-table worker also paying taxes.
That's amazing.
That's the fair tax. We tax what you consume as you consume it, and that's it.
So, how much will I bring home?
Go ahead. How much do you make? We'll just say 40,000, okay? Keep it simple, throw out the deductions, all that stuff. So, you get your 40K, right? Now the first 8,000 is gonna be taxed at 10%. That 8 to 33,000 is gonna be taxed at 15%. And the 33 to 40, of course, is 25%. So that brings your total to $6,345.
Okay, so the average is, what?
16%. And on top of that, you got Medicare, which is 1.5%, and of course your Social Security, which is 6.2%. So actually your new total is $9,405.
Which is 20...
23.65%. You're getting it. You're getting it. Don't even get me started on what the boss has to pay. He's got to pay a portion of your taxes as well, so you don't have to.
Right. And you?
You bring home every penny.
So what do you need from me to get these taxes collected?
Glad you asked, because there is a fair amount of information you need to be aware of.
That's your tax plan?
Oh, no, this is just the revisions for this year's tax plan. What I need from you is you need to keep track of all of your income, as well as any taxes that you've already paid, and also any gifts that you received, or gifts you've given to churches, or charities, or individuals throughout the entire year. Do you do any side jobs?
Every now and again?
Great, because there's some more information about that right here. Everything you need to know right here. So just simply compile that, send it in to us. Be careful, make sure there's no mistakes. If we do find mistakes, we can fine you, or throw you in jail. So you might want to be aware of that.
And what do you need from me?
As an individual, nothing. As a business owner, or if you're doing side jobs, I guess you would have to collect taxes on that, but well, it's all right here.
So tell me, how can I pay less taxes?
Less.
Yeah, I'm trying to get ahead, so how can I pay less?
Well, I suppose you can pay less taxes by earning less money, or you could give to charity.
How is that going to help?
Actually, I'm not supposed to tell you this, but if you know the right people, okay, or if you have a really good lawyer, you can usually get around the big ones.
If I may, under the fair tax, to pay less taxes, you would simply consume less. You would control how much you pay and when you pay your taxes simply by choosing what you purchase and when you purchase something.
So I could stay focused and get ahead.
Exactly.
We just need to find out how much she makes. But the good news is, the less she does, the more we can help.
Yeah.
If I may, with the fair tax, we wouldn't even tax her income. So the more she makes, the more she has.
But still, a consumption tax could eat up a lot of her income.
Which is why at the beginning of every month, we're actually going to give back all that she pays in taxes on basic necessities.
You're gonna give her back her taxes?
Every month, on everything taxed on basic necessities. But we're also going to give it back to you and to every American citizen.
Why?
Well, we believe taxes should be fair.
What y'all think? All right, some quick takeaways from what's in the video. First and foremost, if you're going to run on the fair tax, you got to let people know that it's simple. The current income tax code would take the statutes and the regulations and all the case law, 70,000 plus pages long. The fair tax reaches back to 1913 when the 16th Amendment was opposed, and just rips that all out by the roots and replaces it with something that's incredibly simple. There are no tax returns with the fair tax, no record keeping, no nothing. You pay your federal taxes at the cash register when you buy things. End of story, game over. Fair tax contains what's called the family consumption allowance, from which is calculated your prebate. Now, prebate's a fancy word that we fair tax people made up to describe a rebate that is given in advance. And what that means is this is money refunded from you that was collected that you don't owe on your basic necessities. That's what he was talking about when he says we're going to give you back all the taxes that you paid on your basic necessities. Now, he kind of glancingly referred to this too, but this is a really important part. Legal households only qualify for the prebate. If you're in this country illegally, you will pay the fair tax on everything you buy, and you will take it out of your pocket to pay every penny of it. You will not get the prebate to cover your taxes on your basic necessities if you're not here legally. Now, doing it this way, refunding back everything that was collected on your spending for basic necessities, completely untaxes people at the bottom end of the economic scale. Right now, even people that are not paying income tax because they don't make enough, they're paying that federal payroll tax, the most regressive tax on the book. This completely untaxes people at the bottom end of the scale, and when you hear somebody say, the fair tax hurts the poor, you know they have no clue what they're talking about, or they have no idea how the prebate works. And what this means, the way that works, is you do not take a dime, not one dime out of your pocket to pay the fair tax until you have provided your family with the basic necessities. In other words, you feed your family before you feed the government with the fair tax. The income tax with the withholding has got that flop the other way around. And I don't know about y'all, but I think that's the wrong priority. That's the wrong way to do it. The fair tax is anonymous. You just pay it at the cash register when you buy things. On the day the fair tax becomes law, the federal government no longer has any business whatsoever knowing anything at all about your personal finances. How much money you make, where you make it, how many kids you got, how much you spend for daycare, how much you spend on medical expenses, how much you give to the church. None of their dadgum business. Sound good? I kind of think so. And of course, you bring home every penny. There is no federal withholding from any income source with the fair tax. That means no withholding from your paycheck, no withholding from your Social Security benefits, no withholding from any investment income, no withholding if you go down to the casino floor and hit a big jackpot tonight. Uncle Sam's not going to grab a big chunk of it off the top for you. If you go on Jeopardy and win a lot of money, you bring home every penny. No federal payroll taxes either. Now, one quick caveat here: the fair tax replaces the federal income tax. If you live in a state where the state withholds money from your paycheck, the fair tax per se will not automatically get rid of that withholding. However, when the fair tax, and I'm saying when the fair tax becomes law on the national level, there is going to be a lot of pressure on states to get rid of their state income taxes and go with something similar. Even without the fair tax in place at the national level, we've already got several states, Alabama and Georgia, at the top of the list. They have legislative proposals in their state houses as we speak to replace their state income tax with a consumption tax based on the fair tax. And that was kind of the vision that the founding fathers had. Let the states be laboratories to find out what the best practices are. And when you get the fair tax in a state like Alabama or Georgia, and they see how well it works, that is going to help. But that's the bring home every penny from the federal level. It drives down the cost of doing business. Right now, I've got billions of dollars that businesses, large and small, have to spend both in money, time, and man-hours just to comply with the tax code. You know, you hear about GE a while back that didn't pay the income tax, but their tax return was, God knows how thick. How many millions of dollars do you think it took to put that thing together? How many millions of dollars do you think Donald Trump spends on accountants and stuff to make tax returns that the Democrats want to hang him with? All of that goes away. It drives down the cost of doing business, getting rid of the compliance costs, which in a lot of cases are worse than the tax liability itself. So as the guy mentioned, things cost less. What he didn't really touch on, when you drive down the cost of doing business, you want to talk about attracting businesses and the jobs they bring to American shores. Just wave your hand and tell everybody, hey, y'all, there's no corporate income tax over here in the United States. Why don't you come over here and do business here? Can you imagine how many international corporations are come flocking to our shores if they don't have to deal with a corporate income tax? What's Ireland is like 12%, and a lot of people over there. Cut it down to 0 and see what happens. And that's what the fair tax does. No taxes on savings and investment with the fair tax. Savings and investment. Two of the primary drivers of a healthy economy. Agreed? Agreed. And if you have a tax system that encourages rather than penalizing saving and investment, the economy will absolutely, positively boom under the fair tax. There have been several studies done on this, and there is wide consensus that the fair tax would, in all likelihood, light off double-digit GDP growth in America. Something that is just unthinkable under the income tax. That just doesn't happen. Again, it puts people in control of how much tax they pay and when they pay it. As Laura mentioned, there is no tax on used items. Houses and cars, two of the biggest purchases people make. If you choose to buy a used car rather than a new one, you will pay no fair tax on that transaction. If you move into a pre-existing home, and I understand like about 90% of home sales in this country are for pre-existing homes, no fair tax on that either. The fair tax is levied one time and one time only on the initial retail purchase of new goods and services. After that, something can be sold as many times as necessary, and there will never be another penny of fair tax collected on those subsequent sales. It would all but eliminate tax evasion. Again, as the guy said, imagine every criminal, every non-citizen, and every under-the-table worker will be paying taxes under the fair tax. No more under-reporting income, no more over-reporting deductions, because with the fair tax, the system doesn't rely on that anymore. We've got a better way to do it. Now, they didn't really mention this in the video, but I want to throw this in here as well because it's important that people understand this, that the fair tax will put Social Security and Medicare on firmer financial footing. Now, I'm not going to debate the pros and cons of whether those programs should exist, but the fact is that a lot of people, including this old retiree, has come to depend on those things. And people will vote for candidates, or they will vote against candidates who think they're going to take their Social Security and Medicare. How many hear those ads every time? He wants to take your Social Security away. It's important to people that those programs exist, and today they're going broke. All right, they're spending money faster, they're giving it to illegals is one thing, but both of those programs are going broke faster than you can swim, and the reason is they are not funded in a proper manner. The fair tax would expand the tax base for Social Security and Medicare. Right now, the only people that are paying into those two programs are people working for a paycheck and paying payroll taxes. If you had the fair tax, it would expand the tax base for those programs to everybody whose spending exceeds the poverty level. And that's when you start taking money out of your own pocket to pay the fair tax. It's in the bill. If you want to go look at it, a certain percentage of all revenue collected is earmarked for those two programs. We had a guy going around Florida not long ago and was saying fair tax is going to kill off Social Security and Medicare because it chokes off all their funding. It puts it on a firmer financial footing, and especially if you, of course, Arizona, I understand, has a lot of retirees, like Florida has a lot of retirees. That can be a really winning point. We are going to make sure, if you put in the fair tax, that Social Security and Medicare are going to be around for quite a while. Okay? Now, let's switch for a second into, all right, this sounds like a really good idea. How can I make this work for me at the ballot box? Really simple. Go back to the videos, and in your mind, now, the young lady, picture her as an undecided voter. The two guys talking to her are two candidates running against each other who are describing what their vision for taxation in America should look like. And she's trying to decide which one she wants to vote for. Which one of those two guys would you want to be? I'll give you a hint. It's not the dark-headed guy in the glasses, okay? But full disclosure here, I have seen this time and time again. It happens back home in Florida every election cycle. If you latch onto the fair tax and you make that a primary portion, or at least a very, very visible portion of what you're campaigning on, I can guarantee you, sure as the sun rises, that somebody somewhere, either your opponent directly or more likely a PAC of some kind, is going to run a dishonest attack ad against you, saying, so wants to put this huge tax on the cost of everything you buy and make your life 23% more expensive. We can't afford to elect, fill in the name here. I have heard those ads, they run it, they drive you crazy. Because what every one of those little dishonest ads just kind of conveniently forgets to mention is that this huge tax that you supposedly support replaces some other really huge taxes that you're already paying, and in the process, it puts more money in your pocket, gets rid of withholding, gives you a tax refund every month, and it uncomplicates your life by getting rid of the Internal Revenue Service and doing away with tax returns. Those dishonest ads don't mention that for some reason. So if you really want to look at the entirety of the whole thing, somebody that's running a dishonest ad against you like that is bringing a knife to a gunfight, okay? If you decide to hit back, if you're running on the fair tax and somebody runs an ad like that against you, just imagine for a second what you could hit them back with. I think you should bring home everything you earn. My opponent thinks the government should help itself to a big chunk of your money before you get it. I want you to get a tax refund every month, guaranteed. My opponent wants you to get one once a year. Well, maybe. Okay? I want to eradicate the IRS from the face of the earth. Anybody with me on that one? My opponent wants to keep the most invasive, abusive, universally hated government agency in all of history. I want April 15th to be just another lovely spring day. My opponent wants you to spend a lot of time, effort, and money filling out complicated forms, telling the government everything about your personal finances. I want a tax system that will collect taxes from criminals, illegals, and other under-the-table cash workers. My opponent wants to keep a tax system that leaves billions of dollars owed but uncollected, and that is at least what the IRS admits to. It's probably worse than that. I want a tax system where it's mathematically impossible not to pay your fair share. My opponent wants to keep a tax system that's over 70,000 pages long, written by lobbyists, by the way, and riddled with loopholes, deductions, and exemptions for special interest. I want a tax system that brings businesses and jobs to America. My opponent wants one that continues to drive American businesses offshore. How many heard recently that Ford said they were going to build a plant here? Oops, well, Biden's putting in this new tax plan. They changed their mind. They're going to go to Mexico. That is happening today as we speak. I want a tax system that restores solvency to Social Security and Medicare. My opponent just wants to keep kicking that can down the road. I want a tax system that puts American manufacturers on an equal footing with foreign competitors in the global marketplace. My opponent wants to keep subsidizing imports. And I could go on for a while. I understand we've got some time constraints here we've got to deal with. But the bottom line here, if you run on the fair tax, you can define your opponent as a friend of the income tax and a card-carrying member of the IRS fan club. How do you think that's going to go over for them? I guarantee you that anybody that wants to get into an ad war with you over your support of the fair tax, you can make them feel like a rowboat in the path of an aircraft carrier. The fair tax wins that thing every single time. Americans for Fair Taxation has a website. It's called FAIRtax.org. There are a couple of things I want to point out to you real quick. Right at the top of the main menu, there's an FAQ. I'll open that up if you would. And we're not going to go through the whole thing at this time, but just scroll down and you can see it's a fairly extensive one, a lot of questions there. If you want to educate yourself on how the fair tax works and how to answer these questions, they're all there. And he's not quite to the bottom yet. We're going to keep going. There's a tab up there at the top that says Get Involved. There are a couple of things under that Get Involved tab that you as candidates need to see. First, keep it over there. First down at the bottom, the third one up from the bottom is the Fairtax Toolbox. Fairtax Toolbox, if you open that up, there are a lot of links in the Fairtax Toolbox to some really good research and good arguments. There are links there to the videos you just saw. There are links there, there's a link there to the Kerry Bowers document that we put in there. If you want to convince Democrats to vote for you and you want to figure out how you can message them, get them over, there's some things there in the toolbox about how to market the fair tax to Democrats. Okay, look again under that Get Involved tab. There is also at the top of the list a state leaders list. Last time I looked, there were leaders from 40 of the 50 states are listed here. So if you want to know more about the fair tax, I understand a lot of you may have just heard about it and don't know a great deal about it. I know Mr. Young right there, we talked to him where he's in the bandwagon there. But if you need help understanding the fair tax, if you would like someone to come give a presentation to your campaign staff so they will understand the fair tax, you can go there, look at the state leaders list, find somebody close to you who will come to anybody on that list. We'll be happy to do that. If you can't find somebody, call me and I'll fly out and talk to you as well. One more thing real quick, there's a research tab. And if you look under there, how does the fair tax affect agriculture, how will it affect business, charitable giving, demographics, evasion, on and on and on. There is a lot of good information there at FairTax.org. I would hopefully you all will go there. And again, if you have questions, we're going to be hanging around for a little while. And again, if you need somebody to come out and talk to you later, you can find somebody that will do that for you. All right? I'll let you do that.
If you're not a big fan of social media, we have a website, just FairtaxGuys.com. You don't have to join or subscribe or anything. It's free and open to everybody. There's all the episodes of Fairtax Power Radio, our weekly show, are on there. And you can also email us. We'll do our best to answer your questions. We aren't experts, all right? I'm a retired high school teacher.
Speak for yourself.
Bob did a great job with this PowerPoint. But the point is, if you have a question, email us. If we can't answer it, we got experts backing us up. We've got some of the top people on tax reform that are members of the board of directors for the national group. We also have some of them in Florida. We're lucky enough to have them on the board of directors for Florida. So if we can't answer the question, we'll find somebody that will. All right. So we're going to do the Q&A now.
Yes. So before, Jeff, step over here. Jeff.
Well,
All right, we can sit down here.
I have a few questions, but I think the leading question is, how do you abolish the IRS without repealing the 16th Amendment? Because it seems to me the weasels will just bring it right, income tax. They'll pass this law, have their sales tax, consumption tax, and then they'll bring the income tax back.
No, you're right. The 16th Amendment must be repealed, and it's in the bill for the fair tax that after the fair tax passes, first off, in the legislation, there is language that rescinds the current tax law. Gone, okay? But you're right, if they don't repeal the 16th Amendment, some future Congress and President can start doing both. And we do not want Congress to have both the sales tax and income tax, because we know they can't control themselves. So in the legislation for the fair tax, it has a 7-year window, and it says the 16th Amendment must be repealed within that 7-year window. If not, the fair tax sunsets, and we go back to the income tax. And I can't believe that the people of this country, after a few months or a couple of years on the fair tax, are going to want to keep the 16th Amendment. Now, there's an alternative group called the Convention of States who's working on such a thing, okay? So that's the sister group. All right, John.
John, boy.
Guys, I strongly recommend this. In fact, I got so happy when I saw these guys here this morning. I was one of the first candidates in 2020 to take it on. In fact, I've been thinking about this since the 80s, you know, because what problem I got out there? And you know, I'm in the food industry, and I'm not going to name restaurants or to say this. For example, this, no more thieves. You don't have to steal. The IRS creates thieves. I know some restaurants that got 2 cash registers. One that they show the government, the other one for themselves. I mean, here you have no chance to cheat. You don't have to worry about getting a letter, an audit, or anything. This is a great program. Now, what I want to tell you, gentlemen, is when I signed up to pledge, I thought I was going to also get some more joint advertising with you on social media. I put out maybe 10 ads. Not one time. Like doesn't do me any good. Like is good for that idiot Zuckerberg. I thought you folks would share it into your groups. That's one thing I want you to take back to Randy, that we need more social media support from your company. And what I think should happen as well is I'd be willing to do videos and stuff and have different candidates do videos and saying why they like it. You know, so I think it's a suggestion. Anyway, God bless you.
Thanks, John.
God bless all.
Okay, we're doing a real hard stop for a second. I'm gonna bring up Rhonda. Is your mouth full? Rhonda's mouth's full, I'm sorry. Enjoy. We'll take another question. I know. You, wait, this gentleman had his hand up first. I know.
I'll make it quick. I just want to say thank you for your services of teaching the FAIRtax. As far as what it takes out of the economy with corporate and personal tax preparation, the number used to be $800 billion. I don't know what it is currently. It could go back into the economy. That's what the FAIRtax does. All right? The 3 major parts of why we do not have the FAIRtax right now is because Congress will lose lobbyists and all the benefits. The CPAs will lose a lot of CPA jobs. Okay? And I forget the third one. There's a third one.
Well, let me address that for just a second. We have a CPA friend in Colorado named Jay Wally. We work with a CPA in Colorado named Jay Wally. In fact, he's going to be on this next edition of Fairtax Power Radio Tuesday night. He emphasized, he loves the FAIRtax. He went through it, he read the bill, he did everything, and he says it is a myth and a common misconception that the FAIRtax is going to put CPAs out of business. There is so much more, so many different other services that CPAs offer, and if they don't have to be messing with this Byzantine tax code, they can do a lot more for their clients. There are a lot of CPAs that would love to see the income tax go away, and believe me, those guys are smart. They will have no problem dealing with it. H&R blocks? Okay, with the H&R blocks, they can go find something else as well. Because the economy is going to expand like you wouldn't believe.
Like they can get a life.
Hi, my name's Chris Fish. Question. Eliminating the IRS, that sounds wonderful. What do we replace it with? Because someone has to collect these tax dollars.
Okay. That's real easy. The FAIRtax will be collected by the state departments of revenue. The states will collect it. 45 of the 50 states already have a state sales tax. All of the software companies that make this point-of-sale software that they use, they will incorporate the FAIRtax into it as well. So the quick answer to your question is that the states will collect it, the states will enforce it, and they will just simply remit the FAIRtax revenue that they collect to a small receiving office within the Department of the Treasury that does not need a $13 billion annual budget and does not employ 100,000 people. But yeah, the states are going to collect it. Okay?
I can't think of a better world than less government.
Just one question. As a small business owner, my name is Ricky Ruselli, I'm running California. As a small business owner, a lot of my transactions are checks, cash,
whatever. You say that you're gonna eliminate, forms and whatnot, but now how do I've gotta pay that tax to the state tax collector, correct?
Let Ron deal with that one, he has experience on that.
All right, the question was, you have to forgive my poor hearing, but how does a small business owner,
I'm not using any point of sale software or anything like that. I'm taking checks, cash, for the,
are you currently collecting sales tax for your state?
I prepaid. So I prepaid it in the year.
Okay, so whatever you're doing now, you're gonna continue doing, all right? The states, are very familiar with collecting sales tax. They've been doing it a long time, okay? So in your case and so forth and everybody else, if there is a vendor who's playing fast and loose with the sales tax, whether it's the state or the fair tax, okay? The state knows how to look for fraud. They've been doing this a long time, okay? And if they know, another thing is that the vendor gets to keep 1/4% of the fair tax they collect for their troubles, okay? So if they're not collecting that money and not sending it on, they're screwing themselves out of that money, okay? But, I'm sorry?
Also a vendor as well as a.
Well, by a vendor, I mean a business person.
Selling something.
Yeah, maybe I used the wrong term, but, you know, as a small business person, as somebody who's selling retail to the public, okay? Yeah, so the states know how to look for this and collecting. I know that when my wife and I, like I said, I was a high school science teacher, but after that, when I left education, my wife and I escaped from New York and moved to Florida, and we became truck drivers. My wife and I drove team in an Expediter, which is a straight truck, for 5 years. Then we started leasing trucks out, and Elaine will tell you that it was all my idea. She wasn't, you know, that. Anyways, it was very simple. We had to pay sales tax on the lease fees. Very simple. First, you set up a special account with the bank that the sales tax goes to. You have your monthly gross. You take 6% of that. You deposit that money into that account. You send a report to the state. They take the money. It takes minutes to do it. It takes minutes to do it. Think about that and compare to your current income tax. So if there is some fraud going on, right now the fraud for the federal income tax, depending on who you talk to, is between 20 and 25%. 20 to 25% of the people are not paying their income tax, or not paying all their income tax. With a sales tax, by experience, it's around 2%. Right? People are still going to try to evade it, but it's really difficult. You know, you go into Walmart, you buy a thing, and if you say, I don't want to pay the sales tax on that, right? Security. So it's not going to happen.
Well, we're trying to be if a vendor sells to you, they would charge you tax, and you charge the tax.
Yeah.
This way you don't miss a beat.
It takes two
That's
to
what I
cheat.
think.
Next question?
Thank you, Ron. I want to ask a question. How is the FAIRtax incorporated to the sales tax, and will this take away from the current levels of funding from the federal government? How will the FAIRtax go into the sales tax and be incorporated into the sales tax?
Oh.
They should be very separate.
In the price of the product?
Yes. And make sure
Well,
FAIRtax.
the fair tax will just simply, it'll be like the taxes that are on gasoline. When you go fill up your car, they say it's, $2.80 a gallon, you punch 10 gallons, you pay $28. You don't add anything to it. So the fair tax will be included in the price of everything you buy. You will see on your receipt how much went to the store and how much went to the fair tax, which also means that everybody who buys things will see in black and white right in front of them how much the federal government is costing them every time they buy something. But it'll just be implemented as you would any other state tax like that, and the states collect it and send it on up.
So if something costs $1 in the total tax and it's 30 cents, you're paying.
If something costs $1, and you pay $1 for something, 23 cents of that is fair tax, 77 cents goes to the store. It's 23% inclusive.
That's called
If
transparency.
you did that, if you look at it as, well, I'm putting 23 cents on a 77-cent item, then it adds up to 30%. So something, depending on whether you want to look at it inclusive or exclusive, it's either 23 or 30. But people look at that and they recoil in horror. How could you possibly support a sales tax that big? And they have no problem whatsoever with 25, 30, or even 50% income taxes. And the income tax is replaced by the fair tax, so it should be a wash, should be no problem that the rates would be somewhat similar. It's just going to take education to realize, you know, that this replaces the income tax. And what sounds, people are afraid that a $100 item is going to be $123 at the register. That's why it's included in the price to start with. So no, but it's just education. People are going to have to get used to it. But when they get used to it, they ain't going to want the income tax back.
True Bergerson, Colorado CD6. I think this is a great plan. You know, I mean, I think you can implement it and you have a sunset clause, but you know, maybe something fails. You put in there an emergency thing, so say something catastrophic happens and it doesn't work out as planned, or would it fall back on the Congress to institute that? One question. And the second part, this is totally exterior from import-export tax, correct? Okay, and you can't get Jay's number before you guys leave.
So that's, well, I got you good for 5 minutes. Oh, you have a question about this crazy stuff? I love it though. I love transparency. That's what this is.
Okay, so my question is as candidates, how do we explain something so complex with so many moving parts and you know, effects that it's going to have? Because until we get government spending down, it's, you know, to what, about 15% or so, it's you know, if we're out in the field talking to constituents and we're talking about the fair tax, we're getting a lot of complex questions that's multi-level that it may be difficult for candidates to explain. So, yeah,
That's why I would steer you to the information that's at fairtax.org. Read through the FAQ, read through the research that's up there, and then if you have a question after that, call somebody on the state leaders list and they'll help you.
But you can't do that if you're out in the field talking to a constituent. And
you have to educate yourself ahead of time.
Right, educate yourself, but there's always complex questions. There's always a question on a question. I'm just saying, is there a simpler way, or is this something that candidates should actually be getting into the weeds with or doing during a campaign?
When somebody's asking you to get well off in the weeds, is usually just trying to mess you up. You know, they're asking you about a situation that might happen 0.0047% of the time. Stick to the message. You bring home your entire paycheck. You get a refund every month. You pay your taxes anonymously at the cash register when you buy something. What's wrong with that? Ask them that.
Focus on
Very
the
similar.
Okay. I'm not trying to dodge you. I'm just trying to give you the info you need.
Did that answer the question?
Can I just add?
Please.
These guys are running for Congress. The issue is an issue you need to deal with after you're in Congress, because it will be used by simplistic people to beat you up in your campaign. So it's a great idea, but it's not one you can explain on the stump, I don't think.
Well, hey, there's something, the question was, how did you change it?
It
falls on us, as elected officials, to actually pass this budget. Right, that's our job as Congress, to pass a budget.
Yeah.
That's
There you
what
go.
you need.
Yeah.
You need a resolution.
Next question?
Hi, I'm Loveland Wynn, and I ran for Congress in 2020, and I'm not sure if we're running 2022, but I'm probably going to run 2024. I do have a question. I know that they've spent considerable money researching this, like $20 million, on the effects of things. Is there any evidence that they've shown as far as how it would affect climate change, as far as saving on renewable things, because you're encouraging people to buy things secondhand and reusing them? Is there any research on that as to what the effects would be?
How does that affect that? You're talking about buying secondhand items?
I don't know that there's been a study that could quantify that. I don't know that there's been a study done that can specifically quantify, under the income tax, we're doing this much to recycle on this, and under the fair tax, we'll do this much, I'm not sure that that's been studied per se, but you did hit on it. The fair tax will encourage the use of buying used. And if I'm not mistaken, Jade, if you watch our Fairtax Power Radio show next Tuesday night at 8 o'clock Eastern, our CPA friend Jade is going to attack some of that as well. How it would help the environment and encourage recycling.
And better quality products and repairing products instead of replacing them and throwing them in the trash.
Absolutely. And yes, and I only anticipate the next question. Yes, the demand for used items will raise the price of the used items somewhat, but there will be an equilibrium between the used and the new that will find. And you will always be saving on your fair tax if you buy used.
Excellent. Last question.
Did you bring your Fairtax hats?
Fairtax hats?
We have them, but no.
If you want a Fairtax hat, go to fairtaxstore.org.
Okay. All right, great. Well, everyone, big round of applause. Thank you. Thank you so much. This is very informative.